joining us. We are back again. This time around, we are here with Alero. Alero Onosede is a seasoned human resources executive with over 30 years experience in the oil and gas industry. She has global experience in leadership and human capital management. She's currently the current general manager, human resources in Seplat Petroleum Development Company, PLC. And she's previously worked with Shell in various HR roles and as a venture integration risk manager responsible for the integration of non-technical risk in project promises. Alero holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and an MBA from the London Business School. Okay, thank you. So, Alero, thank you very much for coming on board.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope the audio is clear.
Yeah, it's fine from this end. So to the audience, please, if you have any questions, please post it in the question and answer box. Once Alero is done with the presentation, then we'll try as much as possible to answer as many as possible. Thank you very much. Alero, over to you.
Thank you very much once more for having me this afternoon. And I hope we're all staying well and safe at these times. It's gone on longer than many of us would have anticipated, but that happens to be our reality, and I think gives us a good opportunity to have these conversations, particularly as people managers within our businesses. How do we continue to leverage our human capital in the light of the ongoing pandemic? So this afternoon, I'm meant to be talking about optimizing business performance through people and technology. And I think the real emphasis or focus is as we look at the post-pandemic world. Businesses are opening up now, so the reality is changing as we go forward. So it's really as we begin to look at the new world as we see it. So I have a few questions which I would pose, and then hopefully based on the comments as well, we can have a bit more interaction as the conversations proceed. So it's looking at what are the major disruptors, how really does technology work, and then COVID-19, what is the impact? And then as we look forward to the future of work, what does that look like, particularly in the light of our local challenges and opportunities? I must say that in the time frame, I probably will be running through some of these slides pretty quickly. So if there's anything that you want me to go back and pay attention to, we can discuss that in the question and answer. But I think the key message is really for us as HR professionals, what value can we add during this season? So I think the key, the pertinent issues to look at is what are the opportunities and risks that we see for our careers, our positioning as HR professionals, for the businesses that we do support when we think about the post-pandemic era. There are some businesses that are quite optimistic about the future, and there are some that are quite despondent because of where they have been positioned at the point at which this pandemic started. But I really want us to begin to think about wherever we are, there is a tomorrow, and there is an opportunity for us to reposition ourselves as we go forward. So it's what are the opportunities, but I think more importantly is how do we respond to the risk that are emerging as we go forward. As I was thinking about the topic, and I was saying, I kind of reflected back to my earlier days as a young person and looking at the evolution of what we call technology, and recognizing that even we came on the game really at a point where technology in itself was pretty much advanced. I mean, at the time I was growing up, I remember as a teenager, the telephone at home was always your best friend. So all the girls were hanging around the telephone, hugging it. And the key issue for me was that whoever thought there was going to be a day where that telephone was going to be in your pocket and you could actually do all your talking and walking, as you went on. So technology has been disrupting for some time to come. And as I reflected again, I said, I look at whoever said there was going to be a time that I'll get into a taxi without waiting by the roadside. And I remember clearly those days of haggling with taxi drivers, about how much a drop was going to cost, and basically standing out in the sun until I got it for the right price. But all of that has changed. Those were changes that could not even have been anticipated in many cases in the last 10 years. Or that will be moving money around that will not touch it. I must say that personally, since the last, all through this COVID experience, I think from about March, I have not handled 1 naira. I have not in any case spent a naira. Every transaction has been electronic. And there was a time I probably would have felt very naked if I didn't have a stash of some naira, either in my drawer or in the wardrobe. But then the world has changed so rapidly in the last few years. And all of this begins to tell us that technology was in the past. Technology remains, and it will continue to evolve. And where it is going to take us as a people is actually limitless. We really cannot say where all of this is going to end. And that's why I said there are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. And that is what we're beginning to see with technology, that yes, at a point in the 19th century, somebody invented a telephone, but since then, people have not stopped working on it until they continue to refine it, and it continues to do things that are in many cases extraordinary. And that is going to be the way of life for all of us. So as we begin to look at where we are positioned today, I want us to begin to wear a different lens with regards to how we use technology, how we enable our businesses going forward with technology, and what opens up for us in the future with regards to that. So that was, really thinking, just reflecting on the past to say, what has this journey been on? And of course, the bit I always say is, even with all of that excitement and all of that imagination, nobody saw the pandemic coming. Nobody could have imagined that there was a point coming soon where we would all be locked down and yet will continue. Yet there's still growth emerging in certain areas that are unprecedented. So how do we begin as HR people, as professionals, as business owners, condition ourselves to respond to these totally disruptive and unexpected realities that we have to face? And the answer for me is not in any one book, but I think it will be useful that as we go forward, that we begin to think about what this would look like. I also said, as we go forward, before now, there are always lots of research and people talking about what this future holds. And of course, technology was always a key part of the future of work. The shift in global economic powers, now we don't know where the power is anymore. Is it still in Asia, China? Is America really still a superpower? Or is it now Africa that is emerging on that scene? So really there's some thoughts that we had either to given air and given our energies, or is it the demographic shifts? All of that has been turned upside down. I think the one I find most interesting in terms of this work done by PwC and the future of work is rapid urbanization. And in the same vein, I look at the stories following the pandemic, and people are actually moving out of cities. People are moving back into the villages because it's like, why do I need to be in a situation where I'm thoroughly exposed, my family is exposed, and life is basically unsafe? And so for me, there's some assumptions that we've made going forward that we now need to check. And I said, having thought through all of this and thought through of what the future could possibly hold, I said, COVID happens. And there's one word that has come up with COVID. Everywhere you go, you hear the new normal, the new normal. And I was speaking to a friend, I think just a couple of days ago, and he was really angry about this term. He says, he really gets under his skin to hear people talk about the new normal. What is the new normal? Are you telling me that forever I'm going to be going around wearing a mask? Is that going to be my new normal? And in my mind, I was like, the new normal in my world refers to the fact that COVID has shown up certain things that means that the way we do business in the past is going to have to change permanently. I hope we're not going to be going around in masks forever, but there are some realities that have either been accelerated, there's either cases of acceleration into the future, or in some cases back to the basics. But there are some changes that have come with the COVID-19 that are going to be here forever. So we look at conversations, you can say issues of virtual working, have been around across the world, for, in my experience now, closer to 2 decades, where people have started to work virtually. But the reality is that, particularly in our context in Nigeria, there was still a lot of resistance. And what we're now seeing is that with COVID-19, there's going to be an acceleration into embracing some of these global standards that we've either to, scorned or, basically pushed aside. And I said in some cases it's going to be back to the basics. I gave the example of earlier where you have, whether it's people moving back into the villages, whether it's people doing things, in ways that we used to do it in the past. So now you see daddies once more wanting to spend time with their children, as different from scoring after one business deal or the other. Family units are being rebuilt, parents being involved in education. These were things that were the realities, a couple of decades back. And we've kind of put those things aside in pursuit of what we think is going to be satisfying and move us to the next level. And that's why I refer to, in some cases, the new normal means back to the basics. It means reevaluating our priorities. It means reassessing the things that are really important first to us as individuals, and then also to our organizations as we go forward. So I think it's going to be a new set of drivers as we look into this future. And I think for me, I'll just spend a bit more time trying to shape the conversation of what I see as that new normal. How do I see it evolve, particularly on our local landscape, and also as we look globally, how can we begin to see some of these changes? And I think one of the things I put up there, I said, every employee is now an IT manager. That was something that nobody envisaged. There were people who probably still thought it was the job of IT to do IT. But now we have all become basically responsible for technology. We're moving with it, we're living with it, and we're having to, manage it actively as we go forward. So clearly, even as we talk with excitement about what the future holds and, businesses are opening up, there have clearly been a number of threats to businesses at different levels. I think at unprecedented levels, we've seen companies, basically go under. We've seen bankruptcy of, new levels, unemployment levels, totally unprecedented in different parts of the world. So clearly the threats exist. And it's saying, what do these threats look like? One of the key threats, of course, are issues of business continuity. There are some businesses that basically had to shut down, totally shut down during the pandemic, and they've not been able to recover since then. You have supply chain and product price fluctuations. You have changes in leadership in some organizations in the midst of all of this. Job losses, economic downturns, and in all of these mergers are still taking place. So there's a lot that is going on. And I think one of the key things I keep taking away as a lesson in all of this is how interconnected the entire world has become. How the problem in one basically affects all, and how we all also in anticipation look forward to solutions coming out of somewhere. So I look at the issues around research and the vaccines and whatever the medicine is, we're all anticipating solutions from anywhere in the world because there is a high level of interconnectedness that we now have to deal with. So it has been extremely difficult for many businesses. But I would say that upon reflection, I think the ability of businesses to rebound during this period reflects very much, is closely correlated to the preparedness for the future in many organizations. So the example I would give, for instance, is an organization that did not have the IT infrastructure to manage remote working would have suffered tremendously over these last few months. Organizations that didn't have the balance sheets to be able to withstand this level of challenge and trauma that we've experienced would have really gone under at this time. Or individuals who probably were living month to month, mouth to mouth, really did not have the capacity to respond to all of this. So my personal message is our ability to move forward is correlated to our preparedness for the future. So as HR people, I don't want us to narrow ourselves again into, oh, let me just fix my organization for this pandemic. It's important that as I fix this, my eye is very keenly open to what the future holds, because otherwise I will be prepared for this and something else comes that takes me out. I'm not convinced that this is going to be the end of it. I think there are probably going to be series of other major disruptors in our future. And it's how we begin to ensure that as businesses, we kind of get ourselves ready for the future while holding still and into the present. So continue now, but keep your eyes open to what the future is saying. So when we look at the key business performance indicators, I'm not going to bore you with this because I'm sure each organization has its own model that it uses in terms of what are the key levers that you look for in terms of your business performance, what are the indicators of how well you're doing. I've talked briefly about issues of your performance, financial performance. Balance sheet is extremely important. Your ability to withstand the storm depends on how deep your pocket is, how deeply rooted you are. Your products, performance, getting into the market, pricing, the speed at which all of that can happen, your customer performance, understanding their reach, understanding them, the customer reach, understanding their taste preferences, lifestyle, all of that is extremely important. Your stakeholder management, whether it's communicating, engaging with the stakeholders, has become really critical. Your market performance, your people, which is a key enabler to you being able to deliver on any business. You're a professional, so I wouldn't go over, I wouldn't be talking to you about things that you probably know too well, as we go forward. And then the issues of sustainability, resilience, the issues of longevity of our businesses. So these are the various levels at which you would look at business performance. But as I look at this also, I begin to see that these are various levels in which technology in itself is becoming a disruptor. So everywhere you look at your business in terms of taking it forward, it is predicated and premised on clear impact of technology. One of the key areas I would say, for instance, is about customer management, customer performance. And I was just looking at one of the quotes in the past. We used to say the customer is king, but now the quote is the customer is not just king, the customer is a king maker. How is the customer a king maker? Because the customer has the power of technology to decide whether your product will go forward or not, based on what they choose to say about it. What they choose to put on social media can either make or break your product. So you can't just treat them as consumers, you have to treat them as also a part of foretelling what your future would hold, as understanding what the needs of tomorrow and integrating them into your entire product development and your entire value chain. So this begins to show us that technology in itself is clearly here to stay. So the key essence of our conversation is here, technology is going to stay. And I guess the only other thing you can't take out of any business is the people. We always say at the end of the day, there's going to have to be somebody who basically shuts the business down, even if it does close, even if the business has to close up at a particular point. So technology and people will be the key levers around which I will speak today. I don't want to talk about technology much more. I think I've talked about that in terms of the value it brings to your business, in terms of productivity, whether it's efficiency or your consistency, how it improves your flexibility, enhances speed, customer reach, and security. I would kind of try and run through all of that. And I think I'll run through this as well. I kind of find this whole technology space and the future of work very interesting and exciting today, because you look at today where, the things that I couldn't even imagine, you always say technology is coming, but that when technology begins to think for you, when technology begins to anticipate, when technology begins to create, then, it can get a bit uncomfortable, but that is basically the future of where we're going in the business. I think there's a raised hand. Okay. Anyway, so I'll just talk about what I see again in terms of HR and organizations, the past and the future. And that is beginning to look at what is going to change. And that's why I say organizations have been able to respond based on how prepared they are for the future. So you see that the issues of virtual working is not a challenge for organizations that are already globally distributed or already have small team structures. Organizations that have connected workforce, which means they're already using technology as a leverage for connecting their workforce. Those who operate in on smaller basis rather than large footprints, a bit more nimble and flexible, seem to have the ace even during this period of the pandemic. Innovation is everywhere, open ecosystems, cloud versus on premises. You can imagine at this point where people are having to work remotely, the kind of challenges a lot of organizations were on cloud, which made it easier for people to access information as needed based on wherever they are. Organizations, more women in senior roles, those are going to be emerging trends. I think the key one I always like about this, telling this story, is when you look at countries that have dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic and what difference gender made, also in terms of responsiveness, empathy, the compassion that needed to move things forward. So clearly bringing to light that when nurture and nature is already part of the diversity or the ecosystem, organizations are able to respond better, even in this era of the pandemic. So flatter structures versus hierarchy, people already self-managing. I'm seeing that organizations where issues around performance management and my boss said, or you work because your boss sees you, are suffering a lot more in terms of driving value and effectiveness during this period. So these are for me some of the key areas where you see that those that are already on the right-hand side of the chain are able to respond better during this period of the pandemic. And I think the key message for all of us is we need to do an audit of our systems and see how much closer we are to moving things forward, moving to the right, so that we can deal with the future that is clearly upon us. But as we talk through this, it's important to bring it a bit back home and look at the challenges that we've had here in Nigeria. I think one of the key things that helped me to even sharpen my thoughts around this, there were some surveys. There was a survey we participated in with a group of HR consultants, looking at working from home. What are the challenges? How does that feel? And basically trying to help organizations prepare better for what that future is. And one of the key challenges is around the infrastructure. For us in Nigeria, the issue of power becomes a key challenge. I think over time, we've kind of pushed this issue to the side, and some of us can get really comfortable because you can now afford your own generator and you can afford data. We forget the fact, like I said, that we are all interconnected, and my efficiency or my effectiveness is undermined by my neighbor's efficiency and effectiveness. So if we don't have infrastructures in place at a national level that enable it, we're probably going to be losing out and be reactive every time this sort of challenge comes in. So you have the issues of power, you have the issues of network. I mean, there are times you're speaking with people who are in Europe or America, and it's almost as if they're in your room, and then you call your neighbor who is basically further down the road across the bridge, and the line keeps breaking and you are dropping in and dropping out, so many times because the bandwidth just cannot deal with the challenge that we have. So these are the realities that would have to modify our thinking in the context of Nigeria and how we take things forward. Then we also have this whole issue around our education, our curriculum. What are people prepared for? What future do we still educate our children for? What is being taught in primary school? You still see at this point with this pandemic, there are some schools that are running seamlessly, and you have majority of the Nigerian children who still cannot go to school during this period because they don't have any access to technology. So again, we are on the back foot because of the level and the structure of our educational system. The curriculum that we are teaching in terms of preparing the young ones for the future, of the future that is upon us and the future that is right ahead of us, there is a total disconnect. And I raise this because I'm sure someone will say, I'm not in government, so why is this my business? But I think as businesses and as business owners and as HR professionals, we need to help organizations to be getting more into the society, to be getting more into driving some of these changes, because whether we like it or not, these things still come back to bite us in terms of looking at the readiness of the population for the work that we have and for the world that is ahead. I looked at the issues of poverty. I know many times where a lot of people is still a matter of, is it data or is it food? What really is going to be the choice? I mean, in many cases, your priorities appear so clear, but these are the challenges that we have to deal with in the post-pandemic era. Knowing that the world is moving ahead, how do we get our own country, our own businesses, and ourselves as individuals up for the next level? The other one I mentioned, I'll come to this one last. I talk about time. And I think it's, for me, the issues of respect and the culture of deference. And how does that fit in a post-pandemic world? There are many times you see now that work basically has there are no boundaries. So setting boundaries, maintaining boundaries, respecting boundaries. People just think that, you are always available. The reality is that in other contexts, individuals are more enabled to take charge of their own lives, to take charge of their own time and be able to talk back, to be able to let supervisors or managers know when they're not available to do certain things. But in this world of yes, sir, or sir, yes, sir, you end up piling so much on your plate that at the end of the day, individuals are basically stuck working incredible hours, even supposedly working from home. Then I had the whole issue of socialization, particularly for us, in terms of our need to socialize, our context of socializing and what all of this means. The last point I made there is one of the key challenges for us, of course, is the issue of security. And security in this context is both the physical security and the cyber security. Because as a people, whether we like it or not, we're known as one of the major world capitals around cyber fraud, which is pretty disappointing. But what it also tells me is that there's a lot of potential, because there are lots of young people whose skills can really be redirected in terms of how we enable technology and work going forward. So I think the key areas of discussion will be, as we go forward, virtual versus brick and mortar. Are we coming back into the office? Is this workplace going to look the way it's always looked and everybody is going to sit around a table? The reality for me is, I think for Nigeria and for most of the world, virtual is going to increase. What does that mean in terms of our footprint, our office spaces, our costs? Those are areas we need to rethink, because I think at every point in time, I was sharing with someone yesterday, I said, even if everybody can come back to the office, people have now developed, either lifestyle choices or individual needs that will make the need for virtual work a part of our ecosystem as we go forward. And I think the surveys that were coming in were saying pretty much the same about people wanting to work at least 2 to 3 days virtually. And then the other point I mentioned, I think we need to look at is safety and well-being versus adventure. I know also as businesses over the last few years, for those that could afford it, you want to hold your team meetings in every part of the world that you have not been before. This year they're in Australia, next year they want to be in the Maldives. The key issue is that going forward, safety and well-being will have to trump adventure and risk. So we'll have to be doing a lot more things. We have to be doing a lot more localization and looking at issues within. I mentioned social impact versus winning at all costs. And maybe winning at all costs is not really the phrase, but saying that as businesses, we are going to have to be more externally focused than internal. It's going to be more, it's going to be about more than just our balance sheet, as much as what impact we're making in society, not just because we want to be good, but because the world is also watching and the world expects us to be good. And that becomes part of the brand equity that we can begin to sell. Innovation and technology versus status quo. I think the one thing, if there's any company here that still does not have a clear chief technology officer, that is something you want to fix as quickly as possible. We have to build a culture that enables and ingrains innovation. Data and cyber security versus own servers. I think one of the key skills we need to begin to look at, even within our organizations, are issues of data and cyber security, privacy. How do we ensure that all of those are safeguarded as we go forward? I talked about diversity versus homogeneity, and that is basically saying that there's going to be a lot more difference that we need to be managing, and versus sametitude of all of us looking and feeling the same or wanting the same. Our needs are clearly very diversified. I know that as we went through this process, for instance, in my organization, we did a survey, even as we're looking at coming back to the workplace. And part of that is trying to accommodate the needs of people. Who are the individuals within our company that coming back to work now just does not fit, either because they're taking care of elderly parents, they have young children who are not in school, or they have other physical needs that makes it difficult for them to be able to come back. So as HR professionals, we're going to have to be dealing and looking at a lot of diversified solutions. And then I said schedule versus on demand. So a lot more going forward, things will not be programmatic. Our solutions, our products would have to be portable and on demand basis. So as I look at HR, what is changing, I said is access to a global workforce, because right now what the virtual work has shown us is people don't necessarily have to be in the same place to work for you. So we're going to be seeing a lot more dispersed workforce, people working in Nigeria but living in America or living in China, wherever, for as long as work gets delivered. Remote working, I mentioned, is here to stay. The nature of contracts will be different. So you're more likely to see a lot more contingent workforce versus the traditional regular termed employment. I work for this person. You will see individuals working for more than one or two companies at the same time. So how are we going to put in place contracts and employment relationships that make all of that possible? Pay structures would have to change in many contexts. The nature of contracts, the nature of the labor law, because I know, for instance, as I was thinking through this, in Nigeria, we focus on Nigerian staff in Nigeria, expatriates in Nigeria. But the key issue now is I have people who are not physically located here, but are working for Nigeria in a Nigerian organization. What does that mean for the terms of the employment? What does that mean for taxation? So those are trends that we need to begin to pay attention to in terms of what this future would hold. The other point I made is increased organizational complexity. But I say it's increased organizational complexity mainly on paper, because we'd have to focus more on intrinsic rather than extrinsic drivers. If you want to draw an org chart of one man working for 3 or 2 different teams, it can begin to look quite complex. But we'll need to begin to work with individuals in terms of how is work organized in their minds? How are they able to build contracts with different people at the same time delivering outputs across different teams? So clearly, a lot more internal drivers rather than trying to get things all documented, because it just won't make sense. I said more independent workers, and around more independent workers for me is also about enabling our leadership to think and work with more independent people. There's still too many leaders within our business who are not satisfied until all their people are sitting around their table. But the future of work doesn't look like that. So we need to equip them. And that goes to the issue of reskill. We need to allow them to explore and understand also what this future holds. Otherwise, like I said, even if your business survived this round of the pandemic, if you're not more future-oriented, it might be more difficult for you to survive the next round. I've mentioned data privacy. Learning is going to, and we're seeing it. This is probably one of the examples of it, that the manner in which learning has previously been delivered is going to change radically. The other day, I saw even Harvard Business School have all their programs now running virtually online during this period. So you're going to have a lot more changing in terms of how learning is delivered. What skills are we building? And I said in the past, we used to focus a lot on knowledge. What did people know? and then we focused on whether they had potential. But to be honest, going forward, we're going to have to be looking at people who can create. It's more about the innovation, it's more about the creativity going forward. And then the other point I mentioned is also the issues of culture. A lot of the time we look at culture and the emblems and the signposts of culture. But I'm saying going forward, culture is going to be more anchored on purpose. So it's going to, again, be a lot more intrinsic, so that even if people are not together physically, they don't need to dress the same way, everybody doesn't need to speak the same way. But because the purpose of the organization, the intrinsic value that organization holds is clear to all, people can operate better out of purpose. And the other point I made is going to be a lot more around being other-centric. We're going to have to engineer our organizations to think more in the light of others rather than ourselves. So I think I've probably used up all my time. So I think I'll just take a breather and see if there are any questions, contributions that I need to respond to, and then we can wrap up after that. Ty, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alero. That was a very insightful session. And just to buttress on the point, our speaker before you, Mr. Yomi Awubokun, equally said that organizations that are not ready to leverage on technology might as well close their doors to business, because that is pretty much that's the only leverage we have at the moment, to be able to reach out to produce, to ensure that we operate maximally, and also ensure that we keep our workforce engaged. Okay, so we have just about 2 or 3 different questions. Sorry, I just wanted to confirm, will you be sharing your slides with us, because we have questions on that?
I can. I just created them, so you live with them whichever way they are.
That's fine. That's fine with us. Okay, so I have a question here: how to monitor performance of remote staff? Yeah. I think, how best to monitor performance of remote staff?
Okay. You want me to take that first, or you want to go through the?
Okay, so let me just take all the questions and you can answer them. Temi Akinwumi wants to know, is it all jobs that can work remotely? If no, as HR professionals, how can we handle this if the workers want to? And lastly, in an organization where the management does not believe in independent worker, what advice do you have for the employee to prepare for the future?
Okay, thank you very much. So I think, the point I was making in terms of monitoring performance of remote workers, and I think my approach there is you have to start with the leaders. Because one of the key things that makes managing remote work easier is where there's clarity on what the expectations are, the standards of the expectations, and the time in which it has to be delivered. Now, if you don't have a system that is set up from the beginning to be able to track performance independently, it becomes a challenge when you have to work remotely. So I believe that one of the key things we need to do is start to work with leaders, starting with our performance management systems. What exactly is this individual to deliver? What will success look like? And that's why I said, I've been working in virtual teams maybe pretty much, over the last 20 years, I've had experience with virtual teams. But what I've always seen different, particularly in the Western climate, is that the deliverables are clear. So you will know whether somebody is delivering or not. So we need to go back to the kind of systems we've put in place to drive performance. And it cannot be about effort, which is a bit that we get comfortable measuring. How long is this person working? He really tried. It is not about how well you tried. It is what has been delivered. And we're going to have to skill people in terms of measuring that, in terms of monitoring it, and in terms of giving feedback. Feedback is an integral part of managing performance, whether it's face-to-face or virtually. So your systems must be such that have regular and quick feedback as as work goes on. So those for me are some of the key levels. Go back to your performance management system, equip your leaders, and ensure that feedback is integrated into how performance is measured over time. The question of, is it all jobs that can work remotely? The answer is, where we are today, is no. But what I would say is that you can see that more and more jobs are evolving to being done remotely. So I look at, for instance, even in oil and gas, we always have people on the field. They have to be there. It's physical human beings turning the valves and all of that. But you also see that over time, with the enablement of technology, a lot of that is being done remotely. So the number of people that you need in some contexts or in some countries working in the field is a fraction of what we still keep in the field here. Why? Because of technology. So you will see that over time, not everybody can work remotely today, but you always have to think in terms of preparedness that more and more people will need to be working outside and will need to be able to work virtually. And then the key issue that you then ask is, so what happens when an individual wants to work virtually, but his work does not enable him to, or the nature of the job that he has is not such that he can do virtually? In those cases as well, they would have to, is the nature of the contract. So people will need to know upfront what can be accommodated in their roles and how they can basically shape their work as they go forward. The contracts will always supersede, but as HR people, we need to help the organization keep our antennas open in terms of the evolution of work in our various industries and what those changes mean for who needs to be on site and who can work virtually. The issue around independent workers, and I think this is one that as individuals, and I like the way the person put it, you have to take responsibility for yourself. And that means that as, even if an organization doesn't value independence, it's important that as an employee, as a contributor, you work from a position of independence. And that means that you're going to have to invest more in your own independent thinking. So a lot more research, a lot more use of data, a lot more proactive information given, because what really brings independence is that you're not waiting for people to ask you questions. You are proactively providing insights and information. So you're going to have to create that independence that shows that you are on the edge, you're on the forefront, you're seeking information, you're building on that information, you're bringing insights into your organization based on the information that you're gathering.
Thank you very much, Alero. This has been a very wonderful session. On behalf of myself and the over 150 people who have listened to you speak, would like to say a very big thank you. Okay, guys, we just had Alero. Next, we have
thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I hope together we can move things forward.